Hi. Hello, bonjour, Annie, hola. My name is Emily Robertson, and I'm the artist relations person here at Fringe North this season. I'm very happy to be here on our Fringe North Roundtable, which we'll be doing once again every Thursday evening until the festival begins on August 21st. Remember to tune in weekly and join us in the chat to connect, share ideas, and discuss everything Fringe North with us. Each week, we'll have some exciting guests from our amazing community of performers and creators who will give us an inside look into both their lives as artists and what they're bringing to the festival this season. This week, in a special visual artist edition to the roundtable, I'm so excited to be joined by Caitlin Townsend. Caitlin, thanks for joining.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, some of you may recognize me from being on the production side, but today I'm here as a visual artist, so I'm glad to be here.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for joining. Yeah, and I've been doing lots of podcasts lately, which haven't been posted yet, but I feel like people are gonna be a little bit annoyed by my voice soon, but
No.
um, it's all good. Yeah, so you've kind of introduced yourself, but can you introduce yourself like as a maker, as a creator, as an artist, which some people don't like to use that term, but yeah,
Yeah,
how would you describe you and the work you make?
yeah. Well, I still have a hard time viewing myself as an artist because I'm so used to, I don't know, I don't view myself as like an artist, and this is actually the first time that I've ever put my work out there. So and I am fairly new to this art form. So I have done music for a lot of my life, but this year I started painting actually shortly after, um, or I guess my first one was August before the festival last year. I started painting, and it was the first time I had ever really tried it. Apart from I went to one single paint night a couple of years back with some friends, and that was my only other experience with having painted, apart from like elementary school regular arts class that we all do. But
Yeah.
like as soon as high school hit and I could choose other classes, I was like, no, music, don't want to do visual arts. So it was kind of like coming back around to a part of myself that I had really said goodbye to very early on in life. And yet it was a part of myself that, yeah, I don't know. Like, again, I have a hard time viewing myself as an artist, but I think where I actually connect and feel like an artist is I've always heard artists say, like, oh, like, I don't know what's going to come out on the page when I sit down and do art, or like, I don't know what the end result is going to be. And like, when I paint, I sit down and like, I can have a whole idea in mind of what something's going to look like. And you go from like setting up a forest scene to end up painting the beach. And it's just like what happens. So I never really know exactly what I'm going to paint either. So that's like kind of the one piece that I'm like, oh, maybe I am an artist because that feels relatable to me whenever I hear artists say that now. Um, but yeah, I started engaging in painting as a way to cope with I have been through a lot of hardship in life, and I have a lot of past trauma. I was actually recently diagnosed with PTSD. I'm pretty open about it. But having been through a lot, it can be a lot to like navigate through, and like the inner child healing and like all of those pieces can be a lot of layers of work. So I did become a life coach, and I am a certified life coach practitioner with a practice called Abraham's Fortune Wellness Center. And I do regularly meet with clients. But what I was finding was sometimes it can be a little bit hard to help people through their stuff if you're not ongoingly working through your own stuff. And I needed an additional tool to just sort through my own healing process, and painting for me was that tool. And I started, like I said, last August. So I haven't even been doing it for a year yet, but being part of the fringe world, I was like, well, this feels like a safe way to put myself out there. And at the time when I applied to be a part of this year's festival, I have been working another job too. But I was on medical leave from the PTSD, and also I have an autoimmune disorder that is related to trauma. So when I have PTSD, it like flares up as well. um, so when I was off work, I was like, what am I gonna do? And I was still working at Fringe because the hours are a little bit more flexible, and if you're having trauma come up, you can just kind of stop working. It's a really good workplace for that reason. But I was kind of like, am I ever going to be able to get back to my other job? Which now I'm much more hopeful. But at the time, it was kind of like can I make this an actual career path? And can I potentially like sell prints or the different things that you can do as an artist? This is my dog. He would like to say hello. Um, and I don't know what he's doing. Whoa, hey. Hey, no, sorry. I know we're on air, but I'm not going to not discipline him when he nips at me. Um, um, yeah, where was I? I don't
I'm
even,
just making art, like thinking that you might have to make art, or not have to, but a possibility of making art a career, or yeah,
yeah.
working through potentially not going back to work, and yeah.
And I was like really in a place of like, well, I can't afford not to, so can I find another additional income stream to be able
Mhm.
to like support myself through life? And um, yeah, so it was just kind of like one of those things that was sort of from desperation initially. And I was just like, oh, I can do this thing. But then I started actually being a little bit more disciplined. Again, now that I'm like starting to get back to work and hopefully will be at both my jobs again soon, there's a little less time for it. But at the time when I was off both works, I was actually disciplining myself to like sit down every day and paint for a little bit and to actually treat it as like a job. And it was really healing, really a good space to like see a hope at the end of the tunnel and see possibilities of like, okay, maybe my life won't ever look exactly the same again, but at least I can build something here. And it was a really like a place to kind of like get out everything that was sort of like trapped in of like sorting through emotions. And um, yeah, so it kind of became a little bit of a saving grace that I did apply for the Fringe this year and that I had that to look forward to.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for sharing that, Caitlin. That sounds really difficult, but yeah, art is a powerful tool, I think. And um, yeah, I'm interested in how it feels when you're painting. You kind of did mention a little bit of that experience of just kind of like being able to go through your emotions and stuff. So do you start out without kind of a basic idea, or you just kind of go in and you're like material focused and you're kind of just playing around with paint and seeing what looks like something and then kind of flowing through?
Mm-hmm. It depends on the painting, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
so there are ones that I have like concepts for in my head that I'm, well, it's sort of weird too, but with, I don't know how much you know about PTSD or our viewers know as well, but like it, it's sort of, people know about like the flashbacks related to PTSD, but the part that I still have a hard time like getting used to, well, I mean all of it, but like is that it just kind of opens up the floodgates of like memory and like your mind just has like memories like float through it. So what I was finding is that sometimes at night I would like lie down and like I can't sleep because I was having like nightmares and whatnot, and then like the memories just flooding, but then amongst the memories are just like random images that pop up. So I would get like, oh, that would make a cool painting, or like, and it's not even painting, it's not images of things that have happened, it's just like your mind taking all of those memories and putting them into a form. So, for example, I have this one painting where it's just like a person kneeling in the woods with like all of these snakes coming at them. And initially, the way that that started was I had like a vision in my head of just like feeling like hands grabbing at you. Like I was trying to put into words like what I all of the memories that were like flooding back at me. I was like, it just feels like hands from the past trying to like grab at you and you're like lost in the woods. And then it turned into snakes because when I was actually sitting down to paint, snakes came out instead of hands.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, it's like this really interesting painting that I have that yeah, it started just from this image of like trying to describe for my own self and my own processing like what the experience of having all those flashbacks and just random memories that weren't necessarily flashbacks but just like thoughts from my childhood pop up that weren't even traumatic, all of them, but it's just like all of the memories that come forward, and putting that into onto a painting and onto the page to create like a final piece. So there's a little bit of both, and then other times I sit down and just what comes out comes out.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that. I have so many ideas just for listeners. I'm also a painter. I love painting, and that's my whole, I don't know, my life passion. And hearing you talk about painting is is very interesting to me because over the past like 3-ish years, I've discovered for myself that for me, painting is very psychological and like it's very intuitive. And at least I tried to go there, like when it's the best, when I'm allowing myself to just be present. Um, and kind of flow through and react to the materials and be really like engaged in what I'm doing right now and not thinking about what it might look like. Um, it's a lot of that, allowing that kind of what um, yeah, what like Carl Jung would call the subconscious or whatever, but like, that letting that kind of through. And that's what a lot of people talk about as like a spirit of art, or like the power of art is to allow yourself to like kind of be fully present and to let all of you into that. So like that's pretty amazing that you've arrived at this place where you're making in such an honest way. Like that's amazing. You're an artist. And yeah, so I think keep going. Like that's really cool. That's really inspiring. And I see that Brian Tremblay just joined us. So Brian, do you want to introduce yourself to our viewers?
Yeah, sure. Give me a second. I'm going to close this door here so I don't have to torture my wife with the sound of my voice. All right, here we go. Brian Tremblay, singer, songwriter. And I use the term musician loosely because musicians practice. And I'm also a photographer. I ran a commercial studio in Sault Ste. Marie from 1993 to 2016. There you go. So a lot of years in there. Yeah, I paint too. Nothing to write home about, but I paint. And yeah, so that's what I do. And that's
Thank you.
who I am is up to you.
Yeah. Well, it's good to chat with you again, and good to have you here. How would you describe art to you? Like photography, we've chatted before about photography a little bit,
Yeah.
because Brian and I had a podcast conversation just the other week.
Yep.
But what does it allow you to, how does it allow you to see the world? How has it affected you in your life, being able to use the lens and use all the tools that photography can bring?
Frustrating. My problem is when how have I viewed the world in a different way is the one thing that stuck out that you said. Well, yeah, people suck, because unless I suck. And that's what I began to think, because my problem is that if I make art, I try to sell it because I'd rather do that than have a day job. And when they don't buy it, my thought is, it's the ego speaking, but my thought is, what's the matter with you? Why don't you like this kind of thing? So it makes me, it's taught me that taught me more about doing my art and photography has taught me more about the people who look at it and purchase it than it did. And that's what it's changed my view. It's changed my view on the public and the people.
Mm, interesting.
Yeah.
But so it's slightly jaded.
It's slightly
I think
jaded, but at the same time,
Caitlin
I'm
and
not
I
going to
are,
be dishonest with you. I
yeah.
think it's the truth, because when people come up to you, and you begin to realize that the state of art in general is in a sad state right now. Because
Hmm.
I think you have to look at it with the jaded eye so you can decide on an action that you want to take to correct that. So, but people, again, they don't want art. They want something that looks good with their couch. And that's what it boils down to. And
Yeah.
that's kind of way it jaded me. I'm going, well, you people don't want art. You just want a picture,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
kind of thing. And yeah, so, but it starts jaded, but I think what we don't do is enough education to the people who we show our art to.
Mhm. Well, that makes me think of a few things that I've been kind of told over the years is no one's going to care about your work as much as you do, which can be really hard to take, but also kind of liberating in a sense too.
Sure.
Because when you're kind of your worst critic, or you think like, oh, are people going to understand this? Or like, I don't know if I'm describing myself properly, or, you're writing a bio, or, like whatever for the piece. It's just like so much thinking is going behind it, but like no one else really thinks as much about your work as you do, which is a little bit sad. But I also think it's kind of beautiful in a sense that it gives you this like freedom that that you're not really necessarily trying to like tell people that this is what it is you're just you're just kind of putting it out into the ether. But also the second thought was that the fact that you also did photography as your career, like that probably took a lot of juice from the whole photography as art thing, I'm
Yeah.
assuming. But yeah.
I tried not to let it, because I always did personal work. That's
Yeah.
why I mean, some of the consumer photography studios in town that are still existing, they don't do personal work.
Mm-hmm.
They don't pull the camera out unless they're getting paid, and to me that affects the quality of the product,
Mm-hmm.
because you're there's so much more to it. And why are you being so myopic and just looking here? Why don't you look there? And maybe that's why a lot of my work was an acquired taste, because I used strong lighting, I used shadowy lighting and that kind of stuff. And for some people, to them that was not a good photograph, but it was like, yeah, okay, whatever. So yeah, it's soon if you, yeah, but you know what they say, yeah, if you want to really ruin your enjoyment of something, monetize it.
Yeah. I struggle with the selling work as well for so many of those reasons. It's just I find it hard to transition from making something for you and purely just trying to focus on what you're doing and the meaning of the work and the process, and just trying to be true to yourself. And then all of a sudden you put in the consumer in, and they're like, oh, I really like this one from 4 years ago, you should make more like this, or can you put a tree here? And it's like it's kind of it's it's kind of
Yeah,
destabilizing, because it's just like, well, I'm on this journey right now, and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so it's just thinking about the next, like, again, I kind of was talking to Caitlin about this idea of being present and just being in the work. It pulls you away from that. It pulls you into the future, into like the selling of it when you're making. So I find that challenging. But Caitlin, going back to this kind of idea of how art has helped you view the world, and I know you're talking about making, and it's like, oh, it's really fresh for you, but you also have been in music for a long time, right? So you are you a singer?
Yes, I was a
Yeah.
singer for several years, and I had a band that toured to Elliott Lake, which does not seem super exciting, but when you're a teenager, it was awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, what kind of music do you play, or do you
It
sing?
was like a rock pop band.
Nice. That's awesome. Do you feel any of those skills, or any of that like creative thinking flow into visual art at all?
Oh, I definitely think so, because like a lot of the paintings that I've done, or lyrics that I've like, often I'll write lyrics from my paintings or vice versa, and have like it just captures the essence of the thought in a different way. So,
Mhm. Very cool. I have a comment for both of you. And I don't know if you'll be able to expand on this, but it kind of goes to what you're both talking about. Um, how do you think of like what do you think of the term like art as metaphor? Do you feel that applies to your works at all?
Caitlin, you better take this one, because I have no idea even what that means.
yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. Um,
I'm not a
yeah,
deep artist. I'm like, I made a picture. Do you like it? That's if I go.
Are you mean in terms of like societal patterns or like what and
Oh, sorry. I feel like that was that I just tossed a bomb there.
You can tell who has the MFA here and who doesn't.
no, yeah, sorry about that. I was just thinking like you both talk about art. Like, well, Brian and I had a conversation about photography a little while ago, and I viewed some of his work. And after hearing Caitlin talk about your work, I meant like kind of personal metaphors, as though the art isn't exactly what it is. They kind of represent like either thoughts or stories that that are yeah that may mean other may have other meanings, like seeing that boat on the shore, like what does that boat um what does that boat look like. And there was a painting that Caitlin showed me prior to this, but I'm just referring to a previous painting for those viewers right now. But
I don't know
yeah,
if it
I
helps.
guess there you go.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so in terms of the metaphor, so what I actually have a lot of trouble with is the idea of like, oh, what does this art piece mean? And like the artist knows what it means, because I feel like every time I look at one of my paintings, I could give you four different exploits. Like there's so many layers. And I think back to when I was in university, we had a professor tell us about how like people are like a bunch of grapes. You don't make a decision because there's the one reason that you make a decision. Every decision that we make is like a whole bundle of grapes that goes into that one choice. And I think art is the same way. So when there is like a right interpretation of what this art piece is supposed to be, well, ask me again in 5 years and I might give you a different one, even though I created it. Like it's hard to. So in that sense, I don't think it's like art has one metaphor, but I think there can be like several layers of metaphor within an art piece and within like what's going on in your life at the time and the pieces that go into it. But I think also, at least for myself, as I'm painting, like it's revealing things to me about myself as much as I'm influencing it as well, has like the processes happening of forming it. So um yeah, so I think it's hard to say that it can it even be one metaphor, or like is there like yeah, I don't know that from my perspective it can be, because I think there's too many layers of what goes into the interaction when I'm creating the art.
Yeah, that's a very thoughtful response. Thank you. Brian, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, what Caitlin said kind of lit a spark there. I could say like the piece that I performed last year, the neighborhood, um, which has based on a series of photographs, I created those. Well, those songs were a byproduct of those photographs. That's a better way to put it. So um, there is a story in every one of those photographs. There's something there that means something. I can point out something and go, this is that. So if that's the metaphor, well then sure, mine is a metaphor for it's a metaphor for this for the 21st century. It's a metaphor for the 20th century. And I know, I mean, I'm all old enough to be your fathers, if not grandfathers. But it's I know because your generation doesn't dig going back to the old days, because it's like, oh, there was, women weren't treated properly. Yeah, you're right, probably they weren't. And then but there was a lot of positive stuff there. So the metaphor for me is that it's just about where we came from, and I don't think we can forget that. We can't say those ways are no longer any good, and we're not doing it like we did it in the 20th century. We're now doing this, and we're going to do beyond into that. So if that's the metaphor, maybe we need to at least in my work, I'll explain the metaphor. And thank you, Caitlin, for doing that. I'm going to put that in some promo material. But yeah, that's the metaphor. A simpler time, an easier time when technology didn't rule our lives. So I didn't have to run around spending an hour today making stupid videos of me doing things so I could put content up. It's become less about the art and more about the face. You know what I mean? So there. Does that make any sense?
It 100% does. And thank you both for sharing. You totally answered my question, though I may not have asked it properly. But thanks, Caitlin, for using that analogy. That was great. And I think, yeah, I totally agree with you in terms of it can't just be one metaphor, because we're humans and we're constantly evolving. And yeah, you know, what it can mean something one day, but it can mean a totally different thing the next day. And I think, yeah, in terms of just both of you, the reason why I asked that is because both of you are referencing things from yourselves and from like past, which it's not just an image of, say, like a lake or an image of a building in Sault Ste. Marie. You know, it's more than just the surface. It's more than just the physical object, which is really interesting. Do you have any plans for future projects or anything that you, if say you had $1 million, or if you had all the time in the world, what would you do with that in terms of creativity?
It's a great question. Yeah, I think like being able to dedicate the time more to art rather than having to like stay alive and like yeah, work jobs for that piece. I mean, I love my jobs that I have. So I think that would be number one, is actually being able to like dedicate a specific space for my art, because right now I just don't have that with where I'm at. And there has been one project that I'm hoping to try and get done for the festival, but I don't think I will. But I recently went to visit my grandma in an old age home, and she had like all of these nice like ballerina shoes hanging on her wall, and like a picture of like a girl getting ready for like her dance and whatnot. And when I was younger, she had told me that she wanted to become a dancer, but then she became a Christian and was told that it was sinful. And so I have like this image in my head of like creating like a hand that's literally like handing back her dream to her, because I think that that's well, pardon my language, but I think that's absolute bullshit. And so like her whole life be changed because she thought she couldn't go after what was in her heart and what like her dream and passion was, and I believe it was placed there for a reason and she should have gone after it. So capturing this idea of like this hand like giving her back that dream, and kind of a critique on the state of religion and kind of how toxic it can be, and taking people's dream from them. So that's a project that I would really like to do, and I just haven't gotten around to doing it, but I have like an image of exactly what it would look like with like a hand holding back her dream and like a little dancer like in the hand. So I would love to be able to paint that at some point.
Nice.
Yeah, that's powerful.
No kidding. That's awesome. Yeah. Oh, you're waiting for me to give you an answer?
I was like, do you have any ideas with $1 million check?
Yeah, I would actually. I mean, number one, my problems would be over. That have nothing to do with art, in that respect. Two, then you would start to see me producing material and going to play places that I can reach because I have a budget. So you would just see everything get bigger. You know, I would try to be everywhere with my music. You know, it's like so annoying. You know, I'd be as annoying as Taylor Swift, but I don't want to be famous. You understand that? That's the interesting part. I don't want to be famous. All I want to do is make a living at my music.
Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, I don't, you know, I know I'm not going to win any awards. I'm not getting a Grammy, and I'm not getting a Juno, and I'm not getting a Bob's Country Music Award or whatever it is. I'm not. And I don't work towards that. Making music or art a competition. If you enter songwriting contests, if you enter art contests, if you enter photography contests, shame on you, because it's not a competition. You cheapen the work, you cheapen the learning and the art, all for a contest. And that, to me, that's, you know, say, how do you want to make money in the music business? Start a songwriting contest. and charge people $25 to enter, you know?
Okay.
But that's really what I would do, is I would just be everywhere. It would give me freedom to make, yeah, a lot of great music.
Mhm. Yeah.
I
Could
think,
I? Oh, sorry.
oh, sorry.
Go for it, Kaylin.
I was just gonna say, I think there's a misconception about, especially when it comes to music, which I know isn't the topic of this, so I don't want to go too far down. But like when it comes to music, the size of your like the room is like relevant. When I think it's like it's such a wrong way of looking at it, because you could play a song to one person and it changes their entire life, and they view everything differently, and it just really speaks to them. And you could play it to like tens of thousands of people and nothing lands, they leave, they forget the lyrics, they don't think about it again. So I think there's like a shift that needs to happen in terms of, well, every person present that hears the song can be impacted by it, and it's, even if it's just one person sitting in the corner of a coffee house, like it's just as important and could change that person's life more.
I agree, but at the same time, it doesn't just apply to music. It applies for hanging your work in public, right? Some folks it'll be a stopper, and they'll have to look, and they'll have to, let it soak in, and others would be like, whatever, you know. So it kind of has the same effect, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And especially in like once you start getting into like more public areas, oftentimes people aren't spending the time with the work the same way. Like I'm just thinking in a gallery perspective, it's mostly people going and buying work. Like if it's a public gallery, not the same, because public galleries they'll show work. They put on exhibitions, not for money. But if artists, pretty well the only way to make like a real living just being an artist is either selling your own work or being represented by a gallery. And this is a commercial gallery. And the higher you go up, like the blue chip, this is like the most prestigious ones, fewer people see your work other than like Instagram, but that's not really really seeing it. It's just because they're getting collected by, million-billion-dollar collectors that put them in their art vaults or put them on their walls, and like people, it's just inaccessible. Like you're not actually reaching people that, I don't know. I'm not saying that the uber rich don't matter or anything, but it's just a very small demographic of people, in terms of visual art at least. So yeah, I kind of like Brian saying like, oh, I'd never want to be famous, or you just want to like be able to travel and see the world and play. I feel, yeah, that's kind of what I would do if I were to answer that $1 million question, is just be able to go and probably have a big studio in the bush somewhere or by a lake. Like that's something that I would love. And then after that, it's just that, yeah, like I guess $1 million doesn't really, you still have to work. Like I'm young. It's not enough for retirement these
No,
days.
that would carry me to my death. I'm fine.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting. I'd still would work though, I think, because I don't I've done the not working at all, and not like being involved and just trying to focus on my art, and it's hard to do. Like yeah. I think you need that kind of struggle or like the push to make the work that you're supposed to be making. But anyways, yeah,
Yeah.
trying to think of other questions here.
Well, just building off of what you said, while you
Yeah.
think of a thought,
Yeah.
I think too, with one of the things that I actually really appreciate, because I took time off after my first degree to try and write a book, which I know is a very different art form than visual arts or music, but still art nonetheless. And what I was finding was when you're only doing that, like there's nothing to inspire the art, because you kind of get like isolated in your bubble. So for me, I like always having other work, because it actually helps like inspire and like the thought processes and impact like what it is that I'm creating. And I think like without that, it gets harder to think of things to create, or it just feels very like you end up creating the same piece a million times rather than actually creating different things, because you're not out in the world as much. And I guess it depends on the person, because some people are outgoing, but I'm very introverted. So when I'm not working, like I'm not out in the world, so that I don't have experiences that inspire my work.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment. I agree. Like I kind of mentioned that I learned that not really the hard way, but it was just an experience. I was like, oh, I'm going to take the winter off and just paint. And at the end of it, I was like, this is not what I want. So I also think that it's good to step away from your work and to not think about it. And if you don't have any forceful, for me as well, like kind of for you, it sounds like it was similar, but if you don't have any forceful, like, okay, you have to go here, you have to go do this, like my brain is just constantly thinking about it. And that's like exhausting. And yeah, but yeah, thanks for sharing that. Do you have any like creative inspirations? Do either of you, and this doesn't have to be visual arts, this can be kind of anything. But have you like read a book or watched a movie or had an uncle or an aunt or someone who's like really inspired you in your life to be creative?
Okay, I'll go. I was gonna counting to 10. All right, good enough.
Yeah.
Um, with my photography, it's a big turn on to look at my favorite photographers and do that kind of stuff. Karsh being one of them. Richard Avedon is the other one that I love. Those kind of people that you know, their work was just it was craft back then. It was just gorgeous, and you know, a moment captured with a camera that takes a negative 11 by 14 inches big, you know, whereas you know, now we have a digital camera and we can't quite even catch it. Look at all the pictures online. Nothing's clean, blurry, composed properly. You know what I mean? So it said something. But those guys, their work it was just, I just wanted to achieve that when they took someone's photograph, there was a story there. Everybody had their own story. And you could make up a different one because you wanted to. Or if you saw the picture, you went, oh, who is that guy? What's he all about? Why does he look like that? What happened? You know, and that's what, yeah. And I brought that kind of stuff, passion, to when I taught at Sioux College, and I taught history of photography. That was awesome.
Wow, that's really cool. Um, I don't recognize the photographers that you mentioned. What era was that? Like which years?
Yusuf Karsh, which is really cool. If you've seen a black and white photograph of Winston Churchill, and he is leaning and he looks very stern, Karsh took that photo, and it's called The Lion Roars. And they say that picture helped win the Battle of Britain. And it was taken in Canadian Parliament buildings by Mr. Karsh. So, sorry, back to your question again, Emily. I got
the era, the years, but now
the era.
I
so
have the
we're
historical
looking at
context now.
1940s here, 1930s,
Yeah.
you know, that kind of stuff. Richard Avedon was active probably until the 90s, you know, and in through the 60s. There's a movie with what's her face, Breakfast at Tiffany's, that actress, and I think it's him and someone else, but the actor in it is Richard Avedon. The actor is portraying Richard Avedon, and he's, you know, he's a photographer. So you watch a movie like that, and I always want to go take pictures.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I want to do. You know,
Yeah.
when I again, I read anything about the way they work and the way they think. It's more about the way they think. I read Weston's Edward Weston's book on his life story, and that trust me, and for me, reading a book it's a tough go. I can't focus very well. but that one had me, and I just wanted to go out there and do it and go, oh, that's what way he thinks about it. That's the way he thinks about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get turned on by that all the time. I never call it inspiration. I call it being turned on. And it doesn't mean that, girls.
I'm not taking it as such, so
Good.
you're safe
I'm
there.
kidding. Just a joke. Of course, a joke nowadays could get you killed. So
How about you, Caitlin? Do you have any inspiration?
Yeah, I feel like so I do have things that inspire me, but I feel like for me what actually lights the fire to actually get me to sit down and do art or like write that lyric is often the voices of people who tell me I can't do it. And I get a really big chip on my shoulder and then I'm like, no, you know what, I'm gonna sit down and actually do this. So I think for me that's more been the inspiration. In terms of why I actually started painting or I guess within the past year. I actually came across Jazza is an art channel on YouTube, and he is an Australian artist who just tries different things that he's never tried before, and he made it look possible of like, oh, I can actually try something new. Like I don't have to have started art when I was like 4 years old. I can just try painting.
Yeah.
So it inspired me to just give it a go, which was, I guess, kind of like the kicker into trying new forms of art. And then, yeah, for me, I also really get inspired by television programs. I watch a lot of like Boy Meets World, MASH. Once Upon a Time was a big one for me as well. And just seeing stories where, uh, stories of hope, I guess, and stories where there's hope in places that seem hopeless and nuance. A lot of that in MASH, a lot of nuance of just there being able to be a light at the end of the tunnel or like good things happening during bad times. So that really inspires me to do art, especially given, like I was saying at the beginning, that my mental health piece and art being a really big outlet for that. So I get inspired by those, and then yeah, it usually sparks me wanting to like paint or write a song lyric or whatnot from watching those.
Wow, thanks for sharing. That's really cool to hear. Yeah, I'm so excited about this. Like you talking about your work is really inspiring. I feel like I've said this a decent amount over this conversation, but yeah, I just I think you have such a very like a really cool outlook and a way of thinking about your work and yourself. So I think that's powerful. Yeah, I'm excited for your future in painting, or whatever art form that takes. And Brian, comment. Not that I have to like comment. I guess I feel like I have to comment, but
sure, if you want.
yeah, I just read Instagram is a kind of a weird world, but I follow lots of artists and I kind of hate it and I kind of like it because I'm consuming, you know, these paintings or whatever, mostly paintings, this art that is meant to be seen in person, but they're little tiny like squares, right? So it's kind of crappy, kind of dilutes it. And you're just scrolling really quickly. But there's times like there's little snippets, and there's one artist that I follow, Joshua Hagler, which I kind of stumbled upon through a podcast a couple of years back, and similar idea that I don't listen to a ton of podcasts, but this one just was so interesting to hear someone talk about work and talk about kind of a little bit of the isolation and the back and forth, the battle, the creative battle of creativity, and his kind of navigating the art world. And he talks about like this like exile, that is kind of metaphorical, like he had to remove himself from everyone else's expectation, to really be true to himself. So that's why I'm like, Caitlin, like you're already kind of doing that, which is really cool. But I think a lot of people that try to go and be professional right away, you kind of surround yourself with these people, or you go to school, for example, and that could really twist your idea of like what you're supposed to make. Anyways, long story short, I get really inspired by hearing other artists talk about their work too. So Yeah, I guess we could probably wrap up pretty quickly, unless any of you have some comments to make or ideas that you want to share.
Sorry, I didn't even know what this was about. Garrett said he needed somebody, and I went, well, I got a phone call I'm waiting for, but that's why I sent an email saying I'm going to be late.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm not really sure what this one was about. So I just said, if you want me there, I'll be
Hey,
there.
it was about visual arts, but
Oh,
yours,
okay.
and yeah, so it's all
I
good.
do that. All right, I got it. Okay, cool. I'm good. No comments. Fringe just got to keep it up the good work. That's all.
Yeah, I think from my end, the only comment that I'll add is I find it interesting hearing about like the monetization of art and both of your views on that piece, because I view it more as like, well, the right people will want it, and like I don't care about the other people. And yeah, so I kind of find it's more about like finding the people. And I guess for me, because my art is such a piece of like getting to share my voice, because a lot of my past trauma was about having my voice silenced. So getting to share my voice, it feels like, well, I'm so used to people bypassing it anyways that it's like, oh, the right people who take note of it, then they're the ones that matter. And I view it as kind of like through that lens. So, yeah.
Sounds awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you both for joining for the roundtables. This has been really great. And thank you everyone or folks that have been watching. Merci, miguich, gracias. Just a reminder that Fringe North 2024 will be from August 21st to the 25th. Please check out our website and all of our social media channels in the description below for more information about Fringe North. If you want to support all the work that our team is doing here, please consider tipping the Fringe. Your support not only helps us, but it also helps Northern emerging artists and Northern artists. Every dollar counts. You can find the link below for that as well. We will be back with another live stream next Thursday. We can't wait to see you then. See you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Take care.